Hi, I'm Linda, and this is No Frills ASMR. Today I have a cool guitar to show you, and I also have a special guest, which is really unusual on my channel. First time ever. So if you're here for the ASMR and you're not so into conversational or men's voices, you might want to skip this one. But I think it'll be interesting because we're going to talk about this guitar. And I have a person here who is an expert in Gretsch vintage guitars to talk about it. And that is this person here. Say hello.
Hello.
This is Greg, and he has an Instagram page, Bonfire Surf, where you can see a lot of his Gretsch guitar collection. But he's going to tell us a little bit about these guitars. Now, for people who haven't watched my previous video on just guitar basics, can you just tell us, Greg, is this an acoustic guitar? Is it an electric guitar? What are we dealing with here?
Well, first off, it's not a new guitar. This is an old guitar. This guitar is a 1955 Gretsch Country Club, model 6196. In Cadillac Green is the color. In the mid-50s, Gretsch was, a lot of guitar companies were blending between acoustic archtop guitars and electric guitars. So this is sort of a cross between a traditional hollow body acoustic archtop guitar and with electric pickups. So it's kind of in between.
Now, when you say archtop, are you talking about here? I know, I do know. But what do you mean by archtop?
Well, Gibson basically started making the archtop guitar. Instead of having the top of the guitar flat, it's arched. And that comes from, old school violins and cellos. They were designed with arched tops. The back is also arched. So it has an arched, if you look at it from the side, it's arched.
Is that to make the sound reverberate more? What would be the purpose? Why did those old violins have arch?
I guess it's because they were trying to make the inside of the instrument larger. Because the larger the inside of the instrument, the more the sound vibrates and moves around. So, the bigger the acoustic guitar, the more sound it puts out. And the smaller it is, the less sound, because when you strum the strings, they vibrate, and they vibrate the whole guitar, including the top of it. And then the sound comes out of the holes. These are called F holes because they're shaped like an old letter F.
Like a cursive F kind of thing. All right, so you told us this is a 1950 something Gretsch. What else can you tell us about it?
1955. It was made in probably about March of 1955. The Country Club model.
Whoa. How do you know March? That's a pretty particular date. How?
How do I know March? Well, based off of the serial numbers. All old guitars and Gretsch guitars, they have sequential serial numbers. And so Gretsch was building, in the early 50s, they started building guitars in batches of 50 or 100 guitars of like models. So they'd build like 100 country clubs, and then they'd go build another 50 or 100 different style guitar.
So these are all handmade in the 50s? Like one guy would make the whole guitar, or was it assembly line? Do you know that kind of thing?
Well, yes, they were handmade. There was probably a team of people, a bunch of crafts people who worked on it, not just one person. They would cut the body of the guitar out with templates, probably. So they're the shape of the guitar and everything else is it's rough, and then they would hand finish it. And because they were sort of hand cut and hand finished, no two vintage guitars are exactly the same. They're all a little bit different, which is much different than modern guitars. Today they use computer controlled machines, and they cut out the body, and they cut out all the places for the pickups and everything exact. So new guitars are pretty much almost identical, where these ones are a lot of variations in them.
So do different like vintage guitars of the same model or even the same year batch, do they sound different because of that? Like, yeah, that's my question.
Well, they definitely feel different. Because they're hand cut and hand finished, they all do have a different feel to them, especially like the neck, the profile of the neck is sanded, and a different person may sand the necks, from one day to the next. So they're all different shapes, and the dimensions and the specs of the neck are all slightly different. So they feel slightly different. And so that's one thing about old vintage guitars. They all do vary from one to the next in sound and feel. And even guitars from the same batch, same model, they do sound and play different.
So this guitar is a pretty cool looking color. Is this like a common Gretsch color? Did they make a lot of guitars in this color?
No, not really. If we go back just a little bit, in the early 50s, Gretsch came out with an earlier version, sort of a earlier version of this guitar. It was called the Electro 2, and that came out in 1951. And it was a similar looking guitar, and it was the first guitar that came with this cutaway design here. And it was Gretsch's first cutaway. And the reason for the cutaway is, traditionally guitars came down here, the body came all the way around. And when you cut this away and you're playing the guitar, as you move your hand up the fretboard, you can reach these higher frets and higher notes because the body's not in the way. So once this style came out with the cutaway, that was pretty much standard for guitars moving forward.
Can I just interrupt you for a second there? I know that sometimes guitars have double cutaways. They're cutaway here and here. And I have heard guitar guys say, I only like single cutaways, or I like double cutaways. Why? Is that just a aesthetic thing, or is there actually playability reasons that you wouldn't like a double cutaway or something?
I think the double cutaway is purely aesthetics.
Okay.
I think Gibson came out with the double cutaway sometime in the 50s, and toward the late 50s and into the 60s, they had a lot more double cutaway guitars where this side matched this side. It was just purely for looks and evolution, and it just, it doesn't really serve any function to have the top cutaway as well. When you have a round cutaway like this is called a Venetian cutaway. And if you see a guitar that has a point here, that's called a Florentine cutaway. But going back to the sort of the evolution of this guitar, the Electro 2 came out in 1951. It's a 17-inch wide body, and it was real deep. It was like 3.5 inches deep body. And it came out in two finishes. Sunburst, which is a very common traditional finish, and a natural finish. But in 1953, Gretsch sort of revamped a lot of their electric guitars, including this model. So they sort of took the Electro 2 model and they came up with the name Country Club. And in 1953, they added this color, which is called Cadillac Green. And what's interesting about this color is Gretsch was taking their ideas from the auto industry. So they were taking paint colors directly from DuPont, which was supplying paint to the auto industries, and they were using different colors. And actually, I can show you this. This is a catalog from 1955. And Gretsch was one of the first guitar companies to start using color. You know, traditionally guitars were, here's a sunburst, and then you had more of a natural finish, which would look kind of like this, but this is actually a painted yellow. But here is the Cadillac Green Country Club. Like I said, that came from DuPont, which supplied paint to General Motors. And it's an actual color that they used on Cadillac cars. And here's an ad from 1953 showing a Cadillac. And I believe it's the same color. It's sort of a metallic green. GM and Cadillac used several different shades of green. I think this one might be called Arlington Green. There's another couple of names, but that's where it came from. And a lot of these ideas came from, there was a guy named Jimmy Webster, and he was sort of a consultant for Gretsch. And he was a guitar player, a really good guitar player. He was an idea man. He was a salesman. He was a marketer. And he came up with a lot of ideas for Gretsch during the 1950s. And one of his ideas was using, paint colors. They were a little bit different. This guitar here has two tones. The top of this is called bamboo yellow, and the sides were copper mist, which is sort of a coppery color on the back and side. So they were the first to do that. Here's a guitar without the cutaway. So you can see it's a non-cutaway.
Right. So these ones are just round on, and that one's got a cutaway.
Right. And once they started, all the high-end guitars were cutaways, and the mid and lower end models were not cutaways.
Just a side note that you made me think of with the colors. In the 50s, we work on vintage Royal typewriters that are pink and turquoise and yellow and red. And I was just looking up recently why there was this boom in colors post-war. And part of it was just post-war, but also color TV started to come out. And then people just started to think in all these colors and wanted to use pastels and bright colors. And it's just kind of an interesting thing that happened in the mid-50s. Well, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Oops. All right.
So let's see, where were we? So 1953, Gretsch comes out with the Country Club. They had this color. The 53 models were slightly different. They were a little bit deeper, 3.5 inches. The block markers, or the fretboard markers, I should say, they were rectangle.
You're talking about
these right here. These are mother of pearl fretboard markers, and they sort of help the player as to where you play the guitar. And when they first came out, they were rectangle. I can show you a photograph of that.
So these are the frets, and these are the fret markers. And that wood is, what is it, rosewood? Ebony? What is that?
This fretboard is rosewood.
Rosewood, okay.
And Gretsch used rosewood a lot. And then on their higher-end guitars, beginning in 1958, they switched to ebony. Ebony and rosewood are both very hard woods. They last a long time. They don't wear, and they're really good for fretboards. Ebony in particular, because it's a very dense hardwood with a very close grain. Rosewood like this has some grain, but it's still it's a very nice wood and very common for fretboard material.
Do they still use that on modern? I mean, no, ebony you can't use anymore. And certain rosewoods, I think you can't. What do they use today? Do you know?
Well, let's see if my memory. I believe this is. Boy, what is it? I think this is Brazilian rosewood, but that's become more endangered, so they use Indian rosewood now. I think I got that right.
Yeah.
The ebony, the guitars in the 1950s that used ebony for the fretboard, they use it's black. It's just jet black and super smooth. And unfortunately, what they would do when they got the ebony is they would, whatever country they came from, they would cut down trees and they'd look for the wood that was the most consistently black. And if it had any brown in it, they would just throw it aside. So a lot of waste happened. It was really terrible. Today, when you buy ebony, you'll see streaks of brown in it and different colors, but that's typical.
Okay. What do we have here?
This is from the very first batch of country clubs, 1953. You can see it has square fretboard markers. In 1953 only, there was a batch of 50 of them. No first fretboard marker.
Oh, I don't know if we can see that.
You can see.
I mean, to show them on the guitar. But
Yeah, I'll show
this
that.
one has it.
53. In 54, they had a first fretboard marker. So that's how you know the 53s from the 54 models. I don't know if you can see here, but these knobs are plain. They're just smooth and plain. That was in 53. In 55, they went to arrow knobs.
Yeah, I don't know if they can see, but these have little arrows on them. And actually, looking at them up close like I am, I can tell that they are missing some finish on them.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, there's...
Let's see here. In the early 50s, Gretsch used a clear plastic knob. And I think 53, they went to a plain top knob. This came out in 55. And then in 1958, there's an arrow going through a G for Gretsch.
This says arrow control.
So you can date guitars by the features.
I don't know if I've ever seen a clear one.
Yeah, those are the early 50s before they update them to the metal.
Okay.
Going back to the hardware, this was a high-end guitar.
Oh, yeah.
And all the parts are gold-plated. 24 karat gold-plated, but, it was really thin. So like this called the G cutout tailpiece. This was gold-plated. The knobs were all gold-plated. The bridge is gold-plated. The pickup covers are gold-plated. Switch was gold-plated, but it's so thin, it looks great when it's brand new, but after a while, people touching it, turning it, the gold wears off. But it gives it a nice patina.
Should we take it to a electroplater and get the gold all replaced so it looks like brand new? Actually, I can still see a lot of gold on this part. Maybe it's worth like $4,000 an ounce right now. Maybe we should chip it off.
That would be the worst thing to do.
Wait, chipping it off?
Replating it. It would look terrible. You would take an old guitar that has this beautiful patina and the gold is worn, and if you went and replated this, it would look shiny and brand new, and it would just look so out of place, and it would just devalue the guitar. This tailpiece here, a lot of the gold is wore off this end right here, and that's because when the guitar is in the playing position and you grab it and move it and pick it up and put it down, your hand, at least mine does, grabs right there, and so you can see why the gold has been worn off.
I just want to say Trump would replay it.
Yes. So let's talk about this crazy looking bridge here. This is called the Melita Bridge. Gretsch started using the Melita Bridge in 1951. And they moved and they used them up until 1957 when they changed out. The interesting thing about the Melita Bridge, even though it looks like a crazy contraption, is what's nice about this is you can adjust the intonation. So the saddles on the strings, you can move them back and forth, and that changes the length of the string from the bridge to the nut. And that will then change your intonation, so you can change each string individually and fix the intonation. Basically what the intonation is, when you play an open string, that's an E note. When you play at the 12th fret, I can't see from the upside down. When you play at the 12th fret, it should be an E note, just an octave higher. And if the intonation, if the distance is not correct, then this note will be sharp or flat. And so by moving the saddles back and forth, you can correct the intonation. But what the design of this by a guy named Melita was, these are like thumb screws. They're thumb screws. And they're for easy adjusting. They had tall ones and short ones. These are the taller ones. So basically all you do is you just grab this with your finger and thumb, you turn it, it loosens up, and you can move it back and forth, and then tighten it back up. So you can adjust the intonation without, having to get a screwdriver. The problem is, some players, the way they play, they rest the palm of their hand on the bridge, and you can sort of palm mute. Palm muting is when you sort of rest your palm on the strings and it kind of muffles them to get you a specific sound. These thumb screws will get in the way and they'll dig into your hand. So a lot of people will take these out and replace them with low profile screws. I haven't done that yet, and I probably won't, because these don't seem to bother me. So this came in chrome, and then this was, of course, all gold plated. These pickups are Diarmid diasonic pickups, single coil pickups. And Gretsch used these from the beginning when they started putting pickups in guitars, and they used these up until 1957, because in 1958 they changed from the Diarmid diasonic pickups to the Filtertron pickups, which is a very famous pickup that Gretsch is known for. It's more of a humbucking pickup. These pickups can tend to pick up interferences from electrical interferences, from lights and electrical stuff, and they can hum. And so both Gretsch and Gibson at the same time was developing humbucking pickups, and they're sort of out of phase and they cancel the hum. So, but these have a very unique, specific sound to them.
So all this hardware, it's all original to the guitar. You haven't changed any of that out.
Yeah, everything's original on this guitar. Oftentimes, old guitars like this, one of the first things people will change out is the bridge. Sometimes people don't like having a pick guard. I don't know why. They'll take it off and it gets lost.
Are they finger pickers maybe? It gets in the way somehow.
Sometimes it's just they like the way it looks. Before 55, Gretsch had a tortoise shell pick guard, which was actually made out of celluloid, which is a material that basically deteriorates over time and crumbles and falls apart. But in 1955, they came out with this gold pickguard and the Gretsch logo. This is called the Gretsch T logo because, as you can see, the T in the Gretsch has a T roof Gretsch logo. In 55, the body got a little skinnier. It started off at 3.5 inches, 53, or before 53. No, in 53 it went down to 3.25 inches. 55 is the first year they went down to 2.75 inch body, which is a nice size. So you can always tell in 1955 it's got the thinner body at 2.75 inches, arrow knobs, markers. These are called hump block markers. That's what they're typically referred to, is because they look like little humps. Sometimes people refer to them as cloud markers because they look like a cloud. I don't really think so, but I think the official name, somewhere in some literature that Gretsch had, they called them Alamo style, but everyone refers to them as hump block markers. And, there was another guitar that Gretsch made in 54 that had these first. The country clubs got them in 55. Other Gretsch models, the Gretsch Chet Atkins model, got it in 57, so they're oftentimes associated with the 1957 model. It's one of my favorite fretboard markers. I just think it's a really great design, much better than the rectangle ones. But in 1958, Gretsch went with the thumbnail markers, or called neoclassical markers, and they did that from then on, and that's become, everybody knows Gretsch by those markers. I can show a picture of that.
Yeah, grab that. I think that Gretsch ad may have had some in there. Now that you said Alamo, I can totally see the Alamo on here. I never really thought about it before, but I definitely can see it. Remind me to ask you about just the name Country Club and the fact that it's gold plated. It's very fancy, I think. Oh, here we go.
This book here, this is a 55 version, just like this. This is the Sunburst version. This is from 59. You can see the thumbnail markers. So in 1958, this guitar and a lot of Gretsch guitars went through some big changes. Biggest change, they went from the Diarman diasonic pickups, they changed them, upgraded to the Filtertron pickups, went to an ebony fretboard, thumbnail markers.
Is this still a Melita bridge?
Yes, still use the Melita bridge. They changed out to what's called a space controller bridge in 1958, but this one still has the Melita bridge.
And I'm noticing there's 2 switches here and 2 here, and this one has 1 and 3. They just moved one of them.
Ah, okay. That's an interesting thing. What this guitar here has, a lot of people think the control layout on Gretsch's is weird. I don't think so. It makes perfect sense to me. This is the master volume for both pickups. So you just turn this and it turns the volume up and down, master volume. Then you have a volume control for each pickup.
Okay, so these 2.
And then you have a tone. Turn this down, it's bright. It's basically a tone switch, just the tone.
Or like jazz or whatever.
Yeah, you want to take out some, that's a tone switch. This is your pickup selector switch, so it's got 3 settings. This the neck pickup, or the bridge pickup, or both. Each one gives you a different sound. Gretsch had an idea in 1958. Probably, I guess it was Jimmy Webster who came up with this idea. We'll get rid of the tone knob, and we'll put in a switch. The middle part of the switch, no change. And then you got 2 settings, which rolls off the highs. So you don't have any control over it. It just changes this sound of the guitar and makes it more muffled. And I think it was just not a good idea. Very few people use it. It's called a mud switch. That's what people refer to it as a mud switch because it makes your guitar sound like mud. Now, you can change the capacitor in there and change the values of it and make it more useful, but very few people use that.
I could be wrong, but I think I showed a guitar on here one time that was it a 1970s Gretsch? And I think it had the mud switch.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we talked.
Yeah, once they came out with that mud switch, they kept it for a long time, kept it forever, and bad idea.
Okay. Well.
This is the earlier version of the Country Club.
Ooh, I like this. That's the tortoise shell.
I don't know if you can see. It's got a script logo. It says Gretsch.
Yes.
Missing the first fret marker. Tortoiseshell guard. Clear plastic knobs. They had a sort of a different.
I'm also noticing 1, 2, 3 money symbols on that one. I assume we're going. What do we go up to 11 or how many money symbols?
Yeah, it goes up to 11.
Yeah. One thing about kind of collecting Gretsch guitars, or not collecting, but having an interest in vintage Gretsch, is that they are more, and I'm saying more, affordable than trying to, at this point in time, get vintage Fenders or Martins or Gibsons. Gretsch just don't have quite as big of a following. And so it's kind of fun, I think. And you can find them still like on Facebook Marketplace or wherever, So that's all.
The Gretsch brand is more of a niche.
Yeah.
It's a niche brand. When you look at old guitars from the 50s and 60s, Fender and Gibson, they have a much wider appeal and more. Everybody wants a Fender and a Gibson. Even though they made more Fenders and Gibsons, so there's more of a supply out there, but there's such a high demand for them that the prices have gone crazy. 1950s Fender and a Gibson, I mean, they're just, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000. It's just a lot. Gretsch's, they made less of them, so you think, well, they're more rare, they should be more expensive, but the demand is not as big because, like I said, they're more of a niche brand. But what you're saying is because of that, they're more affordable, and people who are interested in old guitars and stuff like that.
But imagine if back in the 1980s when, you were buying guitars at pawn shops and stuff, if you had just had enough money at that time to spend $500 on some of these guitars. They're worth more than that now. But you got a guild for a couple $100. That's pretty cool, I guess.
Well, that was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Another thing, this guitar is a fully hollow guitar. So when you play it, it does have more of an acoustic archtop sound to it, which is really nice because you can play it unplugged and it sounds really good. When Gretsch went to the Filtertron pickups in 1958, they had to mount them to something. And also a big thing, Chet Atkins, who Gretsch had the signature guitar for, and Jimmy Webster. One problem that Chet Atkins was having with these style pickups is the feedback. And that's probably mostly because the guitar is hollow and the sound would go through and it would feedback. And so one way to alleviate the feedback is they wanted to attach the top of the guitar to the bottom of the guitar. They also needed something to mount the pickups in. So what they did was they put in what's called trestle bracing. And trestle bracing it looks like a train trestle. And there's two of them. There's one here, there's one here. And they're attached to these bars that run all the way down the body on the top and the bottom. And what that does is it attaches the top of the guitar to the bottom of the guitar, and it keeps the guitar from vibrating and feeding back. So it doesn't sound, acoustically, they don't really sound like, they're an electric guitar, so they don't need to vibrate. So that's one thing about that. What else did I want to say? I think I might mention this, but in 1958 they switched to the G knobs. But I did want to show the headstock. Should I just turn it around?
If you can.
How does that look? In the early to mid 50s, Gretsch, this is the truss rod cover, and it's a bullet shape. And for those of you, that's the truss rod cover. And for those who don't know what a truss rod is, a truss rod is a piece of metal that goes from this end, it's inside the neck, and it goes from here all the way down to about the body. And what that does is it counterbalances the tension of the strings. Strings, they're attached down here, and they're attached up here, and the strings are pulling pressure. And depending on the gauge strings you use, we're talking anywhere from 90 to 150 pounds of pressure or more, depending on if you use thicker strings. So if you think about it, the strings are pulling on this neck, and it's causing the neck to bow like that. That's why these old guitars you find at flea markets and pawn shops with no truss rod, the neck is bowed, which makes the action really high. And the action is the distance, how high the string is off the frets. And the higher it is, the harder it is to play, because you got to press harder. Anyway, the truss rod is adjustable. And you turn that, and what that does is the strings bow the neck this way, and the truss rod pulls the neck back straight. Now you want what's called a relief, which means you want a little bit of bow in the neck. Because if the neck was perfectly flat, absolutely dead perfectly flat, when you hit a string, the string vibrates. And the vibration, it'll hit the frets and it'll buzz. So if you have a little bit of bow in there, it gives the string a little bit of a room to vibrate. So, you can adjust that. And also, wood is a natural material, and seasonal changes, the humidity goes up and down, temperature goes up and down, so the wood, contracts and moves. So you will have seasonal changes in which you'll want to adjust the truss rod.
So if you are at a flea market or something, and you find a vintage guitar, and it seems like the neck is bowed, but you can see that there's a piece like this, does that tell you, hey, I could fix this? Or once it's bowed forever? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, is that a thing that a regular person could just, change the tension on that truss rod and fix a bowed neck if they find a vintage guitar?
If it has a truss rod, you could potentially adjust it, of course. The problem is you take an old guitar that hasn't been adjusted for a long time, and that neck is in a bow or even a back bow. That wood has a memory to it, and it'll just get stuck in that position, and you can't adjust it. So that's one reason why I always keep my guitars in tune and adjusted all the time. Because if you keep it in tune, you keep the tension on the neck as consistent. You adjust the truss rod so you have the correct amount of relief, so you have that perfect bow in your neck, and you leave it there. Because once you start getting away from that shape, the wood starts to remember, okay, here's where I am, and I don't want to go back.
Well, what if you were like a college kid and I don't know why you wouldn't take your guitar to college with you, because nothing gets you girls better than a guitar, but let's say you left your guitar behind. What would you advise to do? Do you loosen the strings? How do you keep your guitar from getting a bowed neck if you're not playing it and it's sitting in the closet?
Well, there is a little bit of controversy about that. I've heard that people say when you store guitars for long periods of time, you should loosen the tension on the neck so it's not pulling on it. I don't agree with that because the guitar was made for a certain amount of tension on the neck. And it doesn't matter if you play the guitar every day or you stick it in the closet for 2 years. What difference does it make? You want to keep that bow, that relief, the same. If you go loosening the strings up to reduce the tension on the neck for whatever reason, what's going to happen is there's no tension pulling the neck into a bow, but the truss rod, if there's a truss rod, is pulling the neck into a back bow. And then it's going to get stuck there. Right. So I keep it tuned and in that curve all the time because I think it makes for a stable neck. And like I said, these were designed to have tension on them. They were designed to have a curve in them. I mean, you don't want to be having some weird thing. Going back to the truss rod cover, this is called a bullet-shaped truss rod cover. So you can tell in 1955 Country Club because it has a bullet truss rod cover. In 1956, and other Gretsch guitars along the Gretsch line, they went to a different shaped truss rod cover. It's an elongated truss rod cover. It's longer, more pointed, and just bigger. That's the only way you can tell a 1956 from a 1955 Country Club. And then the only way you can tell a 55 from 56, the only way you can tell a 56 from a 57 is they went to the G indent knobs for 57. And then, of course, 58 is when they changed the thumbnail markers and changed the pickups.
Of course.
Now, I don't know if anybody can see this. If you can see this, there's a little piece of tin foil underneath the string in the string slot of the high E. And that's because the string slot is too low. And playing an open string, it buzzes. You know, what happens is over years, and this is the original nut. Over years,
This is the nut right here.
This is the nut, right?
The strings sit in it.
Right, the string's sitting there, and over years, it's not, super, super hard material. So over years, with the tension of the strings in the nut slot, it just kind of pushes down and they get a little bit deeper and deeper, and then the strings get too low. And so it needs like a new nut with some new slots cut in there. And also, when you tune the guitar, you are moving the strings back and forth in that nut, and that causes it to wear out. So it's kind of worn out, and it needs to be either filled, just this one filled, or a whole new nut. But this piece of metal is just, this piece of tinfoil.
Did you put the tinfoil in there?
I put the tinfoil in there. It's a temporary fix. It's just temporary, and so this doesn't buzz when it's open.
Is this nut made out of bone, or what is this?
Well, I'm assuming it is a bone nut. A lot of newer, inexpensive guitars, they'll use plastic. But when you upgrade or put a new on there, they like to use bone because it's just a better material. And then some guitars will use a metal nut.
But you're saying a bone nut's probably better. That's what you said. Okay. So
the tuners. Let's talk about these tuners. These are called Grover Imperial tuners. And Gretsch only used these on their fanciest guitars. They used them on the country clubs. Anybody else who knows really fancy Gretsch guitars, the Gretsch White Falcon, the White Penguin, used them. There was another couple of other high-end, fully acoustic guitars. The Constellation, I think, used these, but they only use these on high-end guitars. These tuning keys have an Art Deco design to them, and they really are a fancy tuner. Most scratch guitars use open back Waverly tuners, which is more common. And these were all gold plated.
Mm. Boy, that's really worn off.
Yeah, of course, you touch this all the time, and where's the gold off? The Gretsch logo that's a mother of pearl. So somebody went in there and, I don't know, they etched out all the letters and cut out all the mother of pearl and put that in. Another thing about this particular being a high-end guitar is that the binding. Mm-hmm. You can see there's 3 layers of binding going around the headstock. On the fretboard here, it's got fretboard binding, and I don't know how many layers of binding on there. And of course, the body has three layers of binding: white, black, and white. And it's bound on the front and the back. And the F holes are bound. And that's one way you can tell a fancy, expensive guitar, high-end guitar, from an inexpensive guitar is how much binding it has. Because, in the factory, it takes a lot more work to put 3 layers of binding on the guitar. So,
well, I remember when we toured the Martin Guitar Factory, even on new ones, I think sometimes they put like mother of pearl in the binding on their really high-end ones. But the binding is what holds basically the 2 parts of guitar together. I assume they're actually held together some other way, and it's for looks, but
well, okay, 2 things. I think it is for looks. Mm-hmm. The binding layers, it gives it a nice finished, look to it. But there is a function to it. If you just had 2 pieces of wood come together, you're going to have just wood, a wood corner. Mm-hmm. And you bash that into something, that wood is going to get dented and dinged.
Sure.
But you put a piece of plastic, hard plastic there, and then when you bang against something, it's less likely to ding. But I guess I should talk about binding in Gretsch guitars, because anybody who knows Gretsch guitars, vintage Gretsch guitars, knows all about the binding. They are notorious for what's called binding rot. This one has no binding issues at all. This binding on this guitar, which is 70 years old, is perfect, which is really nice. What happened was, in the 1950s and all through the